Hey everyone, it's close enough to 4 o'clock. Oh, I think it might be 4 o'clock now. Fantastic. Hey, how you doing? It is Kristi. It is Saturday, at least when I'm recording this, and we're going to continue on understanding how patriarchy ruins everything. We're continuing with the article by Barbara Smuts, published, I think it's like 1994 or 1995, entitled The Evolutionary Origins of Patriarchy. Sorry, I get online and I cough at you. We've gone through a lot of this article already, and we're going to continue on with it because it's been kind of nice just breaking this up into little segments and getting to know and enjoy. Oop, there's a little window that I won't seen yet. Well, it's not so bad. It's just the chat. It's just in the way. Now let me transition the screens, and hopefully you can see that. So as I do before the start of every episode, I just want to kind of go over what we've covered already. And so to start, I'll just read out, or actually I don't even have to read out. We're going to read out the abstract. I'll have Speechify do it. And then we'll just, actually no, because I already got set up for the origins of patriarchy. I'll read through it. We'll look through the prior sections to set up where we are now. So this article argues that feminist analyses of patriarchy should be expanded to address the evolutionary basis of male motivation to control female sexuality. Evidence from other primates of male sexual coercion and female resistance to it indicate that the sexual conflicts of interest that underlie patriarchy predate the emergence of the human species. Humans, however, exhibit more extensive male dominance and male control of female sexuality than is shown by most other primates. 6 hypotheses are proposed to explain how, over the course of human evolution, this unusual degree of gender inequality came about. This approach emphasizes behavioral flexibility, cross-cultural variability in the degree of patriarchy, and possibilities for future change. The section we're going to get to today is that bit about the hypotheses, although I think we're only going to get through a few of them.
Origins of...
Okay, there we go. So, coming down, we have already covered, she has her introduction, she has her section on evolutionary theory, where she says natural selection favors behaviors that promote individual reproductive success. However, evolutionary theory does not imply genetic determinism. There are a lot of solutions to the same problems in nature, and because evolutionary pressures are maybe consistent across species or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that the solutions that are found are always going to be identical. So we have no genetic determinism in terms of because things are found in nature due to the course of evolution. Evolution of conflict between the sexes. Male and female mammals have different reproductive interests, and these interests often conflict. Males sometimes employ coercion to resolve conflicts in their favor. And I pointed to this as the violence at the core of patriarchy. And it predates human civilization. Sadly, we inherited this messed up situation from our genetic ancestors. And it's up to us to question it and really evaluate it and decide whether or not it's good for us or not. Just because it worked in the past doesn't mean it works now. Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it always has to be that way. Then we get down to male coercion and the various, she talks a lot about different ways that males try to coerce females, including infanticide, which nature rewards by sending females into estrus. So nature is amoral. You can't look to nature for your morality. Because something succeeds doesn't mean it's good. So we really should not ground our moral claims in nature. The more we learn about nature, the more you can see that it's not a good, because it's natural. A lot of bad things are considered natural, Then, when looking at male coercion and different ways that they try to compel females to have sex with them, she looked at the way that female primates resist this and work against it. In that section, her little sum up says, female primates have several means of resisting and thwarting male coercion. Thus, in many primate societies, male control over female sexuality is limited. And in some primates, females seem to be entirely free of male sexual control. So there are models out there for us to work with that are not just male beat everybody till he gets his way. So that was where we got. And now she's going to do this section called The Origins of Patriarchy. And I guess I'll just let it run because that's what we do here. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover in the first 5 minutes, just so if you're coming in late or it's been a week, you don't remember everything we covered, now you're all caught up. Okay. And this is unmuted, so it should be good to go.
Origins of Patriarchy. Many human societies appear to involve greater male control over female sexuality than is typical of most non-human primates, and in contrast to males in most non-human primate societies, human males tend to control both resources and political power. Why? Although anthropologists disagree as to whether male dominance over women characterizes all human societies, depending, in part, on their definitions of male dominance, many feminist anthropologists consider male dominance to be universal. Males are not universally dominant among non-human primates, and even in species in which individual males dominate individual females, male control over female sexuality and other aspects of female behavior is usually quite limited. For example, with rare exceptions, male non-human primates do not often control female movements or the resources females depend upon for survival and reproduction. Why do many human societies show a more extreme pattern of male domination of females than is characteristic of most other primates?
I think that we should just pause it there because that's a really profound question. And I understand that, in these kind of articles, you just sort of like pose these things and you can go on to the next line. But and I'm glad also that she's not saying all human societies, we do see variation. But yeah, why do many human societies show a more extreme pattern of male domination of females than is characterized by most other primates? Obviously, we have minds, we have language, we create societies with norms and social rules. We create a social reality around us as to who can do what and why and with what power or not. And those things don't exist like in nature. Society isn't found in nature. We create it in our minds and then we enact it through our behavior. We manifest our social reality with props like stop signs and road divisions and bike paths. It's all very helpful. The material reinforces the social agreement, but like a social reality, and that's where power usually sits, is in social reality, is constructed by our minds, first and foremost. And so with more elaborate forms of social structure and control, religion, economics, civil society, customs, social norms, politics, justice, all these areas, if you have just manifest heterosexual, cis male domination backed up by violence, then of course human beings have a more complicated society. They also have more complicated forms of oppression. But let's go on to see what she says. That's just my off the dome take. All right.
To address this question, I will begin by asking, under what conditions are female non-human primates most vulnerable to male coercion? A survey of the primate literature suggests that one important factor underlying female vulnerability to males is reduced availability of social support from relatives and friends. Consider first our closest living relatives, the great apes, the orangutan, gorilla, and 2 species of chimpanzees. I have already mentioned common chimpanzees, among whom male sexual coercion is common, and gorillas, among whom male infanticide is common. Orangutans provide an even more striking example of male sexual coercion. They are the only non-human primate in which forced copulations appear to be the rule, rather than a very rare exception.
Whoa. Ugh. Ugh. Okay, I just needed a moment to process that yuck.
In orangutans, virtually all matings by subadult males, and about half of the matings by adult males, occur after a prolonged and sometimes brutal struggle in which the much larger male forces the female to submit. What is it about these great ape females that makes them so vulnerable to male coercion? 2 factors, in combination, appear to be particularly important. First, in contrast to most other primates, female apes disperse away from the place they were born and thus, as adults, they usually do not have relatives around to help protect them.
Now let's talk a little bit about this method of comparison because I'm not questioning it. I just kind of want to explain it. It reminds me a lot of the most similar systems design. J.S. Mill came up with most similar systems and most different systems. And the question is sort of it's a way to do comparative politics or comparative anything. It was really kind of before we had statistics and data and widespread number crunching and all that. But and the design, it makes sense. Like, so now this would be a rather, you could probably do a more sophisticated design to control for things. But but as I think it is also still used in comparative politics when you don't have a lot of cases, right? So here we don't have a lot of species. It makes sense to do the comparison. And you ask, okay, let's look at the most violent male primates in the animal kingdom. And that is what is most similar. They have that in common. And then you kind of look at what things do they have going on that aren't going on in places where it's not happening. And this allows you to disambiguate what clusters of attributes or behaviors or factors seem to be shared over here but don't exist over there. And what she's pointing out is isolation. That when she talked about female resistance, it was always as a collective, right? So if you want to destroy that power base, you isolate people. This is what abusers do. This is what abusers do. You isolate them, you get them under your control, and then you basically like try to keep them there, right? We were born with daddy issues, weren't we, as a species? We were born having to undo all the damage done just from the tactics used by some to survive.
Second, in contrast to most other primates, who travel in cohesive groups so that females are nearly always in the presence of several other individuals of the same species, female apes sometimes travel entirely alone except for their dependent young. The degree to which females are solitary varies among ape species. Orangutan females travel alone with their most recent infant nearly all the time. Interestingly, they are also apparently the most vulnerable to sexual coercion.
Okay, so one of the things that this is going to be a writing thing, right? I remember writing interesting, like in a sentence, like interestingly, blah 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 blah, and my PhD supervisor just said, "Well, if you say that, then you have to explain why it's interesting, because it's not obvious to the reader." And so I've basically stopped using that phrase in my writing, and rather just say like, "This is interesting because," and instead of going interestingly and then having to explain it. So I just it's a writing thing that I noticed.
Female chimpanzees spend up to 75% of their time alone with their young offspring, and, according to Goodall, females are more vulnerable to male sexual coercion when no other males are around to protect them.
So I mean, it's interesting insofar as it's an explanatory factor. Okay, I'm not going to get off the interesting thing, but yeah, I would, as of course, you know, my quant's brain goes, oh, is there some kind of amount of way to track female time alone with their offspring by species, and then look at incidents of male coercion and actually kind of track that. So it's rather than anecdotally observed, that it is I turned up my volume a bit. I can do that. No problem. Thank you for telling me. And yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to rush the chat a little bit and do the stream and everything else. And let me see. My audio clear is coming through. It's soft. Turn it up. I will switch to Bluetooth. And that helped a bit. All right. I'm in the yellow now in my OBS, which is where I try to aim it to be. And so hopefully it's there. My mic is also a little bit farther away from me because I'm sitting, but I popped it up a bit. Hopefully that'll solve it. It's good. All right. All right. Then, yeah, because at this point, and it's not a critique, the data is the data you have, but it's a little bit anecdotal. I would just like to see this funded to understand this relationship more, because I think understanding the roots of violence between, in the home would go like a long way to help us unpack it and start to undo it. Because I think that the cycle of violence is one of the things that destroys our society more than anything the silence around violence in the home, and the fact that we're not really dealing with it, even if we deal with it better. Anyway, continuing on.
Gorilla females spend most of their time in groups where they are protected by the silverback male. But when he dies or is killed by another male, the females disperse and travel alone with their offspring. It is during this solitary period that they are most vulnerable to infanticide. The fourth great ape, the bonobo or pygmy chimpanzee, provides an interesting contrast that indirectly supports the hypothesis that a reduction in social support increases female vulnerability to male coercion.
Let's think about most different systems. Like take the things that they differ on the most, and then look to see what stands out. It's kind of a way of flipping it, but yeah. Anyway, just a way to think about things comparatively.
This shy, elusive ape has been studied in the wild only very recently. Along with common chimpanzees, they are our closest living relatives. Like common chimpanzees, they live in large multi-female, multi-male commonfies, and like common chimpanzees, female bonobos disperse from their natal communities and transfer to another community as adolescents. But unlike female chimpanzees, female bonobos spend most of their time in the company of other females. Although the females in a community are usually not related because they have transferred in from other communities, they nevertheless develop close bonds with other females, which are maintained through frequent homosexual activity. Field studies of bonobos indicate extremely low rates of male aggression toward females, frequent female-female coalitions against males, and a complete absence of male sexual coercion. Thus, among bonobos, it appears that strong female-female bonds thwart sexual coercion.
Which is an interesting parallel if you think about the ways that patriarchy tries to co-opt women and women's voices in order to justify itself and reproduce itself. So undermining female solidarity while perpetuating male solidarity is a way, it's a divide and conquer strategy. And so that way you can see why there's an incentive for those who want to perpetuate the unjust patriarchal distributions of power and respect and humanity, just basically being how human you're considered, would be happy for women to buy into this idea that they're lesser, that their husband is the head, and yeah, they're the neck, but he's the head, and they're equal, but they also submit, and all this other BS that people put into their minds to somehow justify their subordination as equality. So, oh, really good audio now. Woohoo! Happy. So yeah, this is it. I mean, it's one of the things that you found, right? When did we actually see serious social change that improved? And we're just going to focus on, cis, straight women's lives. I'm not going to generalize it at white women's lives. It was when women started to collectively organize, and we had proto and then basically outright feminist movements. That's really when we've seen the most advancement, within using claims of equality and the dignity of persons, weaponizing it against the oppressors and the oppressive systems until their own cognitive dissonance became too much to bear. Yeah, that's kind of, so you see that strong female-female bonds thwart sexual coercion, and it doesn't have to necessarily just be females. There are obviously males who can help too. And again, the whole problem, I want to just point out, I know I say it every time, but the real problem with framing these types of discussions within an evolutionary framework is that it reduces everybody involved to reproduction, which focuses on genitals. And with human beings, we're not just defined by our genitals. We're people with social identities and language and expression. And it also makes invisible, except in very rare cases, homosexual relationships. And so, yes, I just want to point out again that whenever you discuss evolutionary elements of patriarchy, notice the false gender binary, call it out, and explain that, yes, this works when we talk about animals, but human beings have self-awareness. And so we can't just pluck this out of nature. Again, not that we want to assign any moral superiority to nature in the first place, but you get what I mean. I think it's important to say it because I am also trying to notice the false gender binary and notice what's being excluded and who's being made invisible by these discussions framed in this way. Okay, I think we're going to go on. Hmm. To the end of the section, and then we'll start with the hypotheses next week, because it's already 20 after. And I have a feeling I'm going to have a little talk. Maybe I'll have a little talk about hypotheses at the end of this so that I don't have to do it at the start of the next one. Okay, let's go.
The Hamadryas baboon provides one more piece of evidence in support of the idea that female vulnerability to sexual coercion is influenced by the presence or absence of support from other individuals. In nearly all of the other Old World monkeys belonging to this family, Cercopithecinae, females remain with their female relatives all their lives, but Hamadryas baboon females disperse from their kin, like female apes. I described earlier how Hamadryas males constrain female movements not only when the female is an estrus, but all of the time. Hans Kummer performed some intriguing experiments in the wild that were documented on film. He trapped some female olive baboons and released them into a Hamadryas band. Olive baboons are typical Cercopithecine monkeys, and females remain in their natal groups, form strong bonds with their kin, and move freely throughout the troop. What happened when these liberated females were released into a very different social system? Immediately, each female was claimed by a Hamadryas male, who tried to hurt her with threats and neck bites. At first, the olive baboon females simply ran away from threatening males, as they would do in their own group. But within half an hour, after having been bitten several times, each female learned that the Hamadryas male's aggression meant stay with me, and she began to follow the male and remain very close to him, as do typical Hamadryas females. This example indicates how quickly a female baboon, deprived of her network of relatives and friends, will learn to submit to a male who punishes her for independence.
Damn. That hits home. Yeah, I'm just going to let that sit for a second. And then I'm going to hit play.
This evidence from non-human primates leads to the first of 4 hypotheses regarding several factors that I believe account for the evolution of patriarchy.
All right, so I'm going to see what our first hypothesis is, and then we're going to identify whether it's really a hypothesis. Because I have a philosophy of science / social science, kind of hang up on how hypotheses are worded and formed. So let's see how she does hers.
Hypothesis 1. Among ancestral hominids, female ability to resist male aggression was compromised by reduced social support from kin and female allies.
Okay, okay, this isn't a hypothesis. It's like in a lay kind of term, a hypothesis. I would call it speculation. It's speculation simply because I don't know how you would get evidence to refute it. The point of a hypothesis is that you want to test out a model of causality. You think that there is a causal operation at work. So in this case, social support from kin and female allies is directly related to the amount of male aggression in a troop. Like that would be closer to a testable statement, because what we think is going on here is that social support is the thing that varies. It goes up and goes down. And when it goes up, females have more independence and less sexual coercion. And when it goes down, they have less independence and are victims of more sexual coercion. And so the question is there a case where there is increased social support, but increased sexual coercion? How would you know if you were wrong? That is what a hypothesis, that is the beauty. This is why I go on about it. The beauty of a hypothesis is that it allows you to make a prediction of what the evidence should always look like, or should look like most of the time, if your theory is right. And you need to be able to say, if the world doesn't look like X, then I'm wrong. And a falsifiable hypothesis allows you to put your risky causal prediction out on there, and then also establish a cutoff point of statistical significance, usually, or a positive negative coefficient, or it has the most explanatory explanatory power in the model, or the model itself will explain more than the last model. But there's a criteria there that you set out, and you go, okay, I'm going to say this effect's going to be positive, it's going to be statistically significant, or it's going to be this big, or my model is going to improve the fit of variance, what we could explain in terms of variation by 5%, whatever it is. This doesn't do it. It's speculation. It's fine. She's positing a causal relationship here. What she's not providing is a hypothesis because she's not going to test it in any meaningful way. So this is, again, this is just a personal thing for me, that I think hypothesis should be used in very special situations when you have a data set or you have some sort of reference to data and you have a falsifiability criteria. I understand where she's going with this, and I agree with her assessment of causality. I just don't think it's a hypothesis. All right, so we're going to pick it up with that. I think I got one dedicated in the chat. I've got Big Zebra. I'll just pull you up on the screen. And I'm glad you found it interesting. I know this isn't my usual time. Most of you will probably be catching this later. But I appreciate you, bigzebra.com, for stopping by. And yeah, next time we will get into this hypothesis, and we will, she doesn't have an alternative. See, you have to have a null and an alternative hypothesis. And, okay, I'll stop. But we'll get dig deeper into her speculation, her positing, her musing, her thesis even, and see what she has to say. I think, like I said, when I read this article, I really found it fascinating, and I'm glad that you stopped by so that I can share it with you. All right. Until next time, I have been Kristi. You've been awesome. Thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you have a great day, wherever it is, whenever it is that you are. Okay. Now that I got you off the screen where I'm going to actually click the button to say goodbye, I get to say goodbye. Goodbye.